Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Justin and the Food Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm Justin Bizzarro. I'm your host, and today I have with us Farmhouse Poundcakes, and we'll be interviewing Ellen Dawe of Cornelia, Georgia. How are you doing today, Ellen?
I'm doing great, Justin. How are you doing? Thank you so much for having me on, by the way.
Oh, you're very welcome. I love having everyone on and learning their stories. So tell us a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are and forming the business Farmhouse Poundcakes.
Well, there is a bit of a backstory to this. My husband was an equine veterinarian. We lived in Ocala, Florida, and he ended up getting sick. It was a long illness. One of my therapies, so to speak, was baking. So I did a lot of baking and ended up being his caregiver. In 2012, he passed away, and we moved back to Florida or to Georgia to be close to family. Bought a little farm in Gwinnett County. I was trying to figure out what to do. I managed his business in Ocala. I also worked as an equine sports massage therapist, and the distance between the farms up here, I needed to do something else. And so a friend of mine that I'd known for years is a soaper, and she knew I was going organic and looking for something. So she invited me over to her house one day. She said, I'm going to share with you a recipe for organic laundry soap. And so we had a great time in her kitchen that day and made all this laundry soap, and it's really cool in mason jars. And she packed it all up, and she said, now you need to get into a festival. So she said, here's a Brazelton 3-day festival. So I signed up for this and ordered my tent and tables and had sort of a, setup going for someone that doesn't know anything about festivals. And I was there, and the first day I thought, there's just not enough stuff on my table. So I went home that night, and I had pound cake in the freezer. So I bought it out, sliced it up, brought it in the next day, and sold it by the slice. And I sold some of the laundry soap, but people kept coming back for more pound cake. I'm like, okay, I see what's going on here. And I went home and I researched what do I need to do this legally. I really I'm a people person and loved the atmosphere of being at a festival and meeting all these customers and talking to them. And so I got my cottage food license. There's a local strawberry farm, Washington Farm Strawberries, that was opening. It was their season right then. And so someone said, you really should sell your pound cakes and strawberries, go so well together. They had never had a vendor there. So I went and talked to the owners, and their daughter actually has a nonprofit in Africa where she helps unwed young mothers. And so we talked, and they said, we'd love to have you, and if you can just make a donation to her nonprofit, that was great. So that was sort of my first event, and it was so much fun. I've got a picture of the strawberry fields behind me with a little setup, and got to meet more customers and really enjoyed the interaction with all the people. And so now strawberry season was over, and what am I going to do now? So I got into a little farmer's market that was local, and it was little, but it felt big to me. So I did that for a while, and then I started talking to the other vendors there, and there are bigger farmers markets, and there's more festivals that people do. And so that was my goal. So I got into a couple more festivals, and I always like to, let's go bigger. And so I got my commercial kitchen. I just converted my garage on my farm into a commercial kitchen because there was a farmer's market I really wanted to be a part of, and that was one of the requirements. They wouldn't accept a cottage food license. And so I got into that festival and into that farmer's market and then to larger festivals. And then I started doing online sales, and I didn't push it too much because I didn't want to get overwhelmed. Had a part-time employee, and then last summer I decided I just didn't want to be in Gwinnett County. Is really growing. There's tons of traffic, and I'm also from the Shenandoah Valley, so I love seeing mountains. Okay. And I bought a historic home up in the Northeast Georgia mountains. and I have a little commercial kitchen here. And just most recently, I was able to open a retail spot in my living room, which is great because I love the history. Growing up in the Shenandoah Valley, the house I was raised in was built in the late 1700s. This home was built in 1832, and I have a lot of history that goes with the property here. So I just thought this is a great place to start selling. I want to ease off on the festival so much. That's a lot of work. And I'm in a couple of local stores, the Village Market in Satanacucci for one. And so I try to incorporate using local ingredients. So there's a lavender farm close by, and of course I use Washington Farm strawberries, and try to also promote Georgia grown products. So I offer Jumping Goat Coffee, which is a Georgia grown local roaster. And so this is kind of where I am right now.
What?
In the Northeast Georgia.
And I'm sorry to hear about your husband. I can't even imagine what that's like, obviously. So, but tell me a little bit about the products that you have, and we'll go back into the starting of your business, but let's talk about where people can find you, how they can find you on social media, and then the different types of pound cakes that you have.
Sure. Well, the easiest way, of course, is to go online, farmhousepoundcakes.com, and I have a list of some of my top-selling pound cakes there. So I ship all over the country. I also offer, because I just, can't bake just pound cakes, I do granola. I've got a great biscotti recipe, and so I offer that for sale as well. But I also have an event page on my website that lists the festivals and things that I'm attending so that people can also go there. But most recently, I'm open at my location here in Cornelia on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 11 to 4. So that's what I'm doing this year. Next year, the goal is to be open 4 days a week, open Saturdays, and to pull in. Either they're going to the mountains, to Helen. There's a lot of tourism that comes to the Northeast Georgia mountains. So that's the goal next year.
And just so I'm clear, as a recap, so you have the website, you have the Instagram, but you also have an actual physical store that you sell your pound cakes out of. Is it only the pound cakes you sell out of your store?
Well, I sell pound cakes, biscotti, and granola. The granola I started when I was doing farmers markets. I had a good recipe. We made it here, and so one day I took it, and now I have some people that are addicted to it. So it's pretty good. It's all organic. Maple cranberry is the one that I offer online, and in a 1 pound bag, and $8, and that's good. It's pretty good granola. And the biscotti is really good. It's my Aunt Irene was from Italy, and she was known for biscotti, and I was the lucky recipient of the recipe. So, so I offer that for sale right now. I might add more as I go down the road. I'm not sure. That's just sort of where I am right now. And Jumping Goat Coffee, which is a roaster in Helen, they just opened another location just outside of Cleveland. And then the Village Market in Satanacucci carries my cakes. So that's another place for pickup. So we're just sort of starting to branch out with that.
It's a great story. I mean, just obviously there's hardship there, but out of hardship, you've created a business for yourself, and this, blossoming entrepreneurial business in food, and in a great state, in my opinion, that's really helping harness and propel, food businesses as the state of Georgia and the Georgia grown and things like the flavor of Georgia. But I want to go into it a little bit and talk about, so how did you come up with your name and your logo? Let's start there and part of your story, because I'm assuming that was at the beginning, or is it something you developed over time?
Well, all of it is a development over time. The name actually was Farmhouse because I had a farmhouse. And I was trying to, it's an old-fashioned pound cake, and that was the direction I was going with this is we're in the South. People like things that are Southern. Pound cake is Southern. It's old-fashioned. I had a farmhouse. It just seemed like the thing. When I first started, I actually had laying hens. My farm was animal welfare approved, and so my goal in the beginning was all my laying hens. I would have fresh eggs that were laid, and they would go into my pound cakes. And that quickly ended up, I had 42 hens, and even that number was a job just to take care of the chickens. So,
did they produce enough eggs actually to keep up with the pound cake production?
In the very beginning. And now, no.
Yeah, because I deal with eggs quite a bit in breakfast for hospitals and long-term care homes, and just the amount of chickens it takes to lay enough eggs for us to do that. I was just curious because, and then trying to maintain all of the chickens. It's quite a process.
Yeah. It was fun. We really enjoyed it. I grew up on a little farm, and I like the atmosphere, and we'd never had chickens before, and chickens are great, but that was becoming more of a job in itself, taking care of all these hens, and the setup for them, and to be animal welfare approved, and then when you have coyotes and hawks and all sorts of worries that come along with that because they're free range.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, the coyotes, because I think, we have them here in Colorado, and actually when I grew up in Maryland and the farm, we didn't really have them that much, so they weren't as much of a threat, although I know they're coming into every state now. They basically are multiplying rapidly and moving across areas that they hadn't been in before. But so how do you manage that? I mean, you have coyotes coming on your property, and they obviously eat the chickens because they're easy meals, and coyotes are some of the smartest hunters. For anyone who doesn't know, they are very creative animals. So if they want to eat the dog that's on your property or your pet, they'll actually, and it's a male dog, they'll lure the female in to lure the dog to. Yeah, I can't speak this morning. Yeah, to get the male dog to follow the female coyote out, and then they'll get it out of its normal territory and then attack it and eat it. And it's just, and all sorts of things. I watch them with the geese here in Colorado, and they'll actually have one chase the geese towards the other two or three, and as the geese are trying to fly away, the other two or three are jumping in the air and getting a goose each, literally. And it's just, it mind boggles me how intelligent they are at hunting and how they do it as a pack, and it's very laid out. So I don't even know how you battle that with chickens.
Well, I had predator-proof coops, so that they go into lockdown at night is what I would say. They like to go into their coop, or in the wild they would roost in trees. But they would go into their coop at night and be locked down, and then let out in the morning. Now, coyotes hunt all the time, so I saw one down at my coop, looking out the window, and this was 11:45. I looked at the clock, almost lunchtime, and it was just trotting out there, not a pack. This was just a lone one that was out. But there were also cow pastures and in the area, and I remember occasionally you would hear a pack howl at night, and that's a terrifying noise. Yeah. Because it sounds like there's tons of them. Yeah. And
I mean, it's crazy because, here we have them as well, and they howl, and we have some land here in Colorado, but also the baby coyote cubs sound like children crying, and it's like, it's the craziest thing. Like, you're like, is someone hurt or stranded in the woods? But it took me a few years before I got used to it. But they're just, they're unbelievable. And they'll run right through our yard midday. And what we figured out is they'll always send out one to do the scouting, and then they come back. And at night, sometimes it's a horrific sound when they get an animal, and we have woods and things behind us. So the deer, and they don't tend to go after the deer as much because we have mule deer here, but it's kind of crazy how they go after the animals and the noise, the screaming. I mean, it's literally bloody murder, and it's
Yes, it is.
and
No.
I mean they're ruthless once they get it. And so I mean we've had raccoons go down and obviously geese because we have a pond next door. So there's a lot of geese here that when they're flying south for the winter, I guess, and north during the summer, they do the opposite schedule of what people tend to do. And it's just it's nuts though, and they get them, and whether it's rabbits or squirrels or whatever. I mean, sometimes we'll just see the squirrel tail laying there, and it's like, oh man. But I didn't mean to get off on a tangent, but we hadn't talked about it on this podcast. But I think part of like running a farm, and it's not as easy as everyone thinks to begin with, but then let alone the coyotes start entering the picture, and it becomes a whole new world. So
It really does. And there's a whole lot of worries that you have to go through. And when people just go, I'm going to get a farm, or they have a couple acres, think I'm going to get chickens, or I'll have goats or whatever, you really have to take these things into consideration because you won't have them long. Great Pyrenees, the farm dogs are great to have on a farm. They're good guard dogs, as well as donkeys. A lot of people have mules, donkeys, because they'll sound an alarm. And those they play an important role, and it makes them sound. There's a lot of coyotes, which is a worry, but they're actually cool animals. Nobody says that except me. They're really smart, and just smart dogs, essentially.
Yeah. Well, they're wild, they're the dogs without domestication, really. And dogs are smart also. I mean, my dog definitely has me played out. He knows that I'll give him a treat. He's pretty smart in the way he manages me and everything else. So,
yeah.
I mean, just take that intelligence and put it out there, and they'll figure out how to feed themselves and get what they need. And they know where the easiest food is, that's for sure. And cats and dogs and stuff, and people leave them out, and they're easy prey, So they think, domesticated dogs thinks it's just another dog, and the coyotes lure them. It's interesting, and you can see their intelligence too when you look at them. And a few years ago, I was actually walking my dog where we lived at a different house, and my sister-in-law's dog as well. And because they were out of town, and literally I had 3 coyotes start following us on the trail.
Gosh.
And I had them on leashes, thank goodness. But it was, but what they were doing is then they would lure me, and then actually one came to the front of us eventually, like about a mile down the road. Eventually one popped out the front, and I'm like,
wow,
well, okay, they're not scared of me, and it's like 1:00 in the afternoon. So, like, how do I do this?
Looking pretty good too, huh? They're really hungry.
Yeah, so I called Deborah, and I'm like, okay, like, what do I do here? Like, I am, like, literally surrounded by coyotes. I can't go off the trail because it's on a canal, so I'd go into the water or into this woods area, which would be worse. And she's just like, make a lot of noise or wait for someone else to come up or whatever. And thank goodness, like, a guy came on his bike and eventually and helped me out, just scare him off. Because it was like, I mean, so they were just waiting for me. And I'm like, are they really not scared of me? And they're just not scared anymore here. I mean, they'll literally come right up to the house or see if there's any food laying around or run right by the front door. I mean, it's a crazy thing. I know we're off on a tangent, but I just wanted to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, well, and to further the tangent, I was coming home from visiting my son at college, and just right up around the corner, shortly after I moved in, and you probably experienced this too. First time I saw a bear out of the zoo was right there, just a quarter mile from my house. And also, speaking of like walking your dog or whatever, we moved up from Florida, and down there it's alligators. So you have to be aware of the wilderness.
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate. Well, in Colorado, I've only seen one bear, and we were up in the mountains. I was with a dog also, but we were up in the mountains just hiking. So it's the only time I've seen one here. But in Maryland, I used to see black bears all the time. hiking and around the farm and stuff like that. And they're pretty docile comparatively. They are scared, but I hear the brown bears and the grizzly bears are not as lenient. But I guess if you back a black bear into a corner or split a mother and a cub, that you're in pretty much not good place. So that's not good. But my parents did the same thing. They got donkeys, and I do hear that the Pyrenees dogs will actually attack the coyotes. So I mean, and most dogs, if they're in a pack, will protect the farm or whatever, the larger dogs, from what I hear. I know St. Bernards are good at getting rid of coyotes and things like that as well, but they need to be in a more than one because they don't stand a chance as one. And,
that's right.
And so that's kind of interesting thing, I can't even imagine. It's just, and it's awful what they do. So, I mean, if you have a pet and it's outside, you have coyotes, you always want to be aware. I mean, I've tried everything. I've tried wolf urine. I've tried all these things to try to get rid of them. I've tried scaring them off. I've tried the motion lights. It just doesn't, they don't care. They're like, whatever.
Really is a situation out there.
And it doesn't matter if you have a fence, they jump over it. I mean, the things can jump like I've never seen. They're pretty amazing. They can leap, from 6 to 7 foot fences, no problem. They'll get themselves right over it. And so I'm like, okay, well, this is just something that's now, instead of being lazy, it's just being smart, right? And making sure the dog's not out by itself and, just keeping an eye on things. And it's basically what it is. So I can't imagine what it's like. I'd worry about my chickens. Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, that's terrifying. This really sounds like a much more serious problem out there than it is here right yet. That I have seen more and more. And one of the things I did like about being animal welfare approved, though, is that they not only looked at, they protected the predators too, because, they have a life. So you weren't allowed to kill the coyotes or anything. It's like, make sure you're, or the hawks, or, you really, which is a nice concept.
Well, I mean, there is an ecosystem. Yeah, and I mean, people don't realize it, and as bad as the coyotes are, and sometimes I wish I could, they wouldn't be around. They do keep things like the rabbit population in check, and And I will say that the amount of geese we have, they will eat my entire yard, and grass, every bit of grass they can eat, the geese eat. So the coyotes sort of keep that balance as well. I mean, the geese would literally eat every freaking blade of grass you have, and people don't realize it either. Is actually geese, the amount of manure that they produce, and it's unbelievable.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And what they do to ponds and creeks, and how they kill fish when they're overpopulated and throw off ecosystems. I mean, we were just at a pond the other day and it had tons of geese in it, and you see all these dead fish on the shoreline, and it's really just because the ponds, it happens about every spring, they're overloaded with the geese, and they just kill off the fish that are in there for a while until fresh water can sort of clean itself out, because they manure so much, it pollutes the water so bad. And and so it's interesting. It's an interesting concept, and the whole thing of keeping everything balanced. Not pound cakes, but a very
not pound cakes.
So let's go back to the pound cake conversation, because I'm very interested. So what year did you actually start as a business?
2014 officially.
Okay, so it's been about 5 years. And over those 5 years, what have been some of your biggest hardships?
Oh, I tried to think about that. Everything is trial and error, and there is a quote that I like, that sort of a motivational quote is, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Of course, that's Maya Angelou. But, when a lot of things I'll just jump into and not have the education behind to go forward, such as creating a website. I just went on Wix, and I'm not a young lady. I'm a little bit older. I'm 59, but I don't have the technology experience behind me. And so I just create my own website. And with a lot of it, it's like, I don't know what I'm doing, but let's just go ahead and do it, and we'll learn along the way. So that's my biggest thing is trying to not be discouraged. And I don't get discouraged very often. Fortunately, when you go on Facebook, I have only 5-star reviews, and there's many, I think there's 38 of them, I'm not sure. But that's all I want. So if I ever get someone that's not happy with something, it is all about the customer, and I want them to be completely satisfied. I do samples at festivals and events, and that's what sells. You can't sell anything unless you, or not much of anything unless you do samples. But I always look, I want people to try a sample and be like amazed, incredibly amazed at how good the pound cake is. That's what my goal is. So that's as far as hardships. I really don't. I'm pretty optimistic. I'm grateful too. It's I feel like God's blessed this whole thing, and it just keeps pointing me into the direction I need to go.
And I think
as far as where I am right now, it's like I've got the festival thing down pat. I do some pretty big ones. It's a challenge to prepare for them because I will sell, excuse me, I'll sell 500 cakes in a weekend. And that's a lot of pound cakes to bake when you don't have, my 2 sons help me in the kitchen. They are great with prepping pans. We hand butter and flour each pan. I don't use a spray. I don't like sprays. And it tastes better when it's butter. So, it takes a lot of prep work to do that. So I've got the festival thing down pat, but now I'm doing something new. It's the retail end and doing a little bit of wholesale. So, and it's figuring all those new unknowns out. So it's exciting.
Is it harder to get to the festivals because of the store, or is it something you manage where the store's open during the week and then the festivals are weekends?
That's what I'm doing is I have this store, and I just opened a couple weeks ago. We're going to be doing a grand opening on May 11th, which is a Saturday. It's one week, and I don't have a festival. And just inviting people in, and we'll have some coffee and pound cake to try. And just to get to sit on the front porch of the big farmhouse front porch with rocking chairs on it, and great little view. Yeah.
And because by the time this episode airs, the store will be open, could you give everyone the address and your operating hours just so they know, so if they want to come visit and have some pound cake, they know where it is?
Absolutely. The address is 752 Old Athens Highway. And that's in Cornelia, Georgia. The zip code is 30531, and it's just off of 985 and Duncan Bridge Road. Duncan Bridge Road is a road that takes you to Helen. 985 takes you straight up to
awesome.
3 minutes, North Carolina. It's right up in the corner.
Oh, so it's up north in northern Georgia, pretty north then.
North of Gainesville, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what are your operating hours?
Right now, it's Wednesday through Friday from 11 to 4. And that was sort of, I do have festivals going on this year, and that was the thought is I can be open while I'm baking. People can walk in and smell that wonderful pound cake baking in the oven, and see if I can create and establish a customer base, and hopefully next year not do as many festivals and focus more on online sales, some local wholesale, and then the retail.
And I want to talk about the festivals, but I want to just make a comment on something, which is the baking of the food or pound cakes when people come in. It's something that grocery stores discovered a long time ago, that actually people buy more if they smell fresh baked bread in the store. And it's proven true because once people start thinking about food and they get hungry, they buy more. But I think in your case, being able to smell it as well as be able to sample it, it's incredible because now you're giving them 2 senses, and people really remember things that way. And it's quite an incredible thing. And we don't realize it as humans that if they can smell it, touch it, and taste it, that you're really making an impact on them. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, smell it, touch it, taste it, and at the same time, have someone tell you how simple the ingredients are, the quality of the ingredients, and if they're local ingredients and that sort of thing.
So tell us about that, and let's get in more detail, like why. I mean, we've talked about that you use local ingredients, you keep them simple, you cared about the animal welfare. Tell us about why you're so passionate about that and why you decided to go that route with your pound cakes.
Well, because I want the best pound cake possible, or the best of anything that I bake. I want it to be the best quality. And I am concerned about, as much as pound cake being healthy as possible, not using bleached flour. I use King Arthur unbleached flour. It's certified non-GMO. I like to be able to say this. And part of them, those are concerns I would have normally. I believe that it really helped when I was doing some of the farmers markets, that the focus of the customer base there was they were very health conscious. And I applaud people that support local businesses. And while doing the farmers markets, primarily farmers markets, some of the festivals, but you get to know a lot of food vendors then, people that are growing their own fruit. Sometimes I go to the farmers markets and get blueberries or strawberries to make my blueberry almond pound cake, or I do a strawberry lavender pound cake, and I use lavender from Red Oak Lavender Farm here in Dahlonega. So, yeah, it's in Nielsen, Massey, Madagascar, bourbon, vanilla, and everything. And so just trying to if you use the best quality, you're going to have the best flavor.
And
pound cake.
Is that how you choose the flavors of your pound cake, sort of what's available around you, or what you also see at the festivals and the markets that you go to?
Well, I do seasonal. So I try to look for, when I go shopping for any kind of fruit or whatever, I can't just say I can have strawberry all of the time, because sometimes the strawberries aren't the best. So yeah, and blueberry, although we will freeze them sometimes, so we have them available throughout the year. Blueberry almond I don't have on my my website to order, but I just come up with different. We just did a flavor the other day. It turned out really good. That's trial and error also. It was a coffee banana chocolate chip, and that was good.
That sounds amazing.
I was like, what would that be? Coffee banana chocolate chip, and it was pretty good.
We love banana bread in our household here, and we actually put chocolate chips in it. Well, I shouldn't say we. I do. I'm a spectator of this sport, and but because I can't cook all day long and all that, but baking I have trouble with. And it's actually really a science. It's an amazing science. So I really appreciate that, and can be like, wow, that what you're doing is amazing. And the trial and error thing, like how you tweak recipes for baking, it's to me, it's totally something so much harder than actual cooking food and tweaking recipes. But I love the sound of that pound cake for sure. And I'm a fan of anything with bananas or chocolate in it. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
So
there's a lot of different flavors that I do. I'm also a huge Outlander fan. I don't know if you're familiar with Outlander.
No.
Books. Okay, it's a series of books by Diana Gabaldon. Very, very popular. It's a huge fan base with this almost a cult following. And the first 4 books are actually out as a series on Stars. And I was actually looking at my own genealogy and studying that through Ancestry.com, and realized I've got a lot of Scotch-Irish, and my great-grandmother is a Mackay from the Highlands. And was reading Outlander. I wanted to create a flavor to give a nod towards that. So I came up with the Tipsy Laird, which is an orange whiskey cake. It has dark chocolate bits, raspberry puree swirled throughout the top, and an orange whiskey glaze. And that's been hugely popular. I was able to get a cake to, we call him herself, to Diana Gabaldon, and she was gracious enough to have a picture taken with the cake and allowed me to use that in my marketing and all. Yeah, so I like to do a lot of different flavors of key lime with crushed macadamia nuts on top. Glaze. I go on and on with the flavors. It's endless possibilities. Getting back to the banana though, I grew up, my favorite breakfast was banana pancakes, and my mother would put brown sugar on top of maple syrup. So I do a maple banana pound cake as well.
Oh man,
So which flavor you want? I'm going to send you one.
Yeah, well, all of them sound good. I'm just like, I haven't eaten breakfast this morning, and anyone who's listening in, we're recording. It's 7 a.m. right now in Colorado, and I'm trying to get the coffee down to wake up. But it's like, the part of the problem with this podcast and doing it all the time is I often end up hungry, and I'm just like, right. And I'm already a hungry person as it is, and. So
go on and tell you more.
Yeah, no, please do. Because I'm very interested in all the flavors and all of that, and I want the audience to hear the possibilities in what you're doing, and obviously have the opportunity to market yourself. So, I'll prop a question just to help move it along. But what are some of your most popular pound cakes? And I know you said you do them seasonally, but what would you say are the most popular ones?
The trio that I always have on my table are the old-fashioned vanilla. It has a little hint of almond flavoring, a luscious lemon, which was a finalist in the Flavor Georgia contest, and then toasted coconut. Those three are always on my table. And vanilla, it's a good vanilla. It's pound cake, so you have to have just the plain pound cake. Excellent to slice and toast and put some butter on it. And that's a sour cream. I do a cream cheese as well. That's pretty good. The lemon is just made with freshly squeezed lemons, lemon zest. It has a lemon curd swirled throughout the top, and then it has a little lemon simple syrup glaze on top. So it's a really good lemon pound cake. It's just really tasty, especially with that lemon curd. And then the toasted coconut's made with real coconut milk and coconut oil, and then it has the toasted coconut on top. So if you're a coconut fan, which I am, the coconut's really phenomenal.
That sounds delicious. And so let's talk. So we're going into spring, and or are in spring, I should say. Not here in Colorado, since we just had a couple of days of snow.
I'm sorry, I know.
But and summer. So let's talk about what are some of the other pound cakes you'll do seasonally? Because I'm just interested. What are some of the spring seasonal ones that you'll have coming around, and the summer seasonal ones?
Sure. Well, right now we're getting ready to go down and get some big buckets of strawberries from Washington Farms, and I will make a strawberry lavender, which is such a great flavor combination. So we'll have strawberry lavender pound cake and strawberry rhubarb. So my mother used to make strawberry rhubarb pie, and that makes a great pound cake. Also, then we cruise right after strawberries. It's blueberries, and it's blueberry almond, lemon blueberry. So do the different types of fruit. Apricot almond, sometimes I'll make those. That doesn't have to be seasonal because I use dried apricots for that. But that's it's good breakfast pound cake. What I call them when they have a fruit in them like that. Double chocolate zucchini with walnuts. Zucchinis, everybody has zucchinis. So, and people don't realize, some people know that zucchini doesn't really have that much of a flavor. It's more in there to provide moisture. It's a nice moist pound cake with a lot of chocolate.
Yeah, my mom used to make zucchini bread growing up, and it's an incredible thing. And it's funny, I didn't think about that until you said that. It gives me a little bit of a throwback. I haven't had zucchini bread in a long time.
That's one of the things that I love about when I go to events and I'm giving samples. You don't realize what a memory pound cake is to people, especially here in the South, because I hear it time and again. This is just like my mother's pound cake or my grandmother's pound cake, where they'll just relive a memory, and which is wonderful.
I mean, and that's a great thing because you have pound cake, it brings back a memory, so it's also, then you have an emotional tie to it, and as a marketing standpoint, that's amazing. What is the difference between a pound cake and a regular cake?
A pound cake, actually, a little history behind it. The recipe came from Europe, France, in the 1700s, and it was called four quarts cake in France. But it was called a pound cake because it was a pound of sugar, a pound of butter, a pound of flour, and a pound of eggs. That's how they weighed it and made it. It was a very dense cake. Over time, people have added flavoring. They would, early on, they'd add rosewater, wine, whiskey, rum, whatever, something to give it a little bit of flavor. But a pound cake it's more of a dense cake than like a regular cake. It's the amount of ingredients, the balance.
I think that's awesome. Actually, I didn't know that it was a pound of sugar, a pound of flour, and a pound of butter. Is that what you said it was?
Mm-hmm. And a pound of eggs.
And a pound of eggs. It's an easy to remember recipe, obviously now, but that's an interesting way of doing it. So it is different than other cake, but I actually thought it was something more complicated than that. Your answer was so simple. I'm like actually lost for words because I was prepared. Okay, it's going to be complicated. I'll go into a line of questionings on the pound cake, but I'm like, okay, that was so straightforward. It seems to make sense. And 4 quarts cake, I guess, is
4 quarts cake.
Yeah. So
now,
a quart is a pound, basically, right?
Right. That was the original, so things have changed. People have added things. I do sour cream pound cake. Is basically all of my basic recipe is a sour cream pound cake recipe. I love sour cream. It gives it a nice moist flavor. But I love the history that's behind that you can go back and see where it came to this country in the 1700s. It's up on the history of my place, too. I love history.
I love history as well, and I'm fascinated by that. I didn't realize that it was actually from Europe, and can you even get it? Is it still called 4 quarts cake in France, or is it pound cake?
I'm not sure if it is or not. I belong to a Facebook page. A couple of years ago, a lady from France had commented that they learn to make pound cake when they're in elementary school. That's one of their requirements.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was interesting. Yeah. Like that's such a thing there. And they'll make a savory pound cake too. It has cheese and meats and things in it, which I've never tried that.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that would make sense. I guess you get a salty and a sweet sort of in the same flavor, or maybe they use less sugar, but if it's a pound of each, I guess you can't.
Yeah.
It was interesting because France has come up with a lot of stuff in food, and I know everywhere in the world has great things that are true to them and things like that. But I can't remember. Deborah and I were just somewhere this weekend, and we learned something else came from France, it's called a French tuck, which is a way of tucking in the front of your shirt and not the back of your shirt. And I'm like, dude, they get just all this stuff comes out of there, and they get named after everything. But you just did it to me again, which is the pound cake originated from France. I guess they could call it French cake instead. But okay, so tell me, so you've now got your business up and running. You're moving. Tell me about. I'm still like, wow, that's so simple of a recipe. It mind boggles me. But tell me about how you chose festivals and so you're in this whole festival circuit, and you're obviously successful in it because I've looked at your webpage since we've been on the podcast, and you have all of them listed there in your schedule. And I mean, you're basically like a pound cake rock star. I mean, you're on tour basically with the pound cake. So tell me about how you decide which ones to go to. Is that trial and error? And, talk to me a little bit about that and what actually it's like to be at the festivals and things like that.
Sure. It is a bit of trial and error, and then you end up meeting vendors that it's almost like a little family network. You talk to them and where they've been. I had a gentleman that was at the Cherry Blossom Festival 3 years ago, and he pulled me aside. He comes up from he does like pickles and relishes and things, and he comes up from Florida, and like, you come all the way from Florida? He said, yes. He said, and if you want to go to some good festivals, follow Jenny's Nuts and Fudge. And she was there, and she was great too. She was very gracious, and so you run into other vendors that are successful, and they're really nice and will share their information. And so he said, whatever she goes to, and she on her page, she's got a list of events. So that's how I was like, okay, I will follow Jenny's Nuts and Fudge. So I signed up for a lot of festivals that she went to, and then you have to take a lot of things into consideration too. There's a lot of cost that goes into going to one that's out of state. But going to the festivals is so much fun. It's hard work. There's set up to it, but I love being there as long as the weather cooperates.
Yeah.
You never know. I do have some friends that were at a festival this past weekend, the Dogwood Festival going on. They had to shut it down yesterday because of the tornadoes were coming through. So there's always that risk that you put a lot of money into vendor fees and travel expenses and all that. So there's always that risk. But when everything comes together, the weather, the people come and come to buy, it is a beautiful thing. And so you just, you get a lot of advice from other vendors, do some networking and trial and error. So I started out sometimes, you learn which ones to avoid. And it depends on the scale too. I don't want to sound like I'll just avoid certain festivals. Where do you want to be? What your product is? Everybody likes food though, so that kind of makes it easier for me than for some other vendors that have some other type of product that they're trying to sell. But everybody about 10:30 in the morning is hungry.
Yeah, that's
and
so true.
A Poundcake, buy them. So that makes it easier. But yeah, it's been trial and error, and then repetition too. You want to come back, the festivals that were pretty good, you want to keep coming back to them. Brazelton, I'm preparing for that. That was the very first one I told you about early on, that I went with laundry soap years ago. It was in 2013. And they do 4 festivals now a year. And I'll be at the one the end of this month, and it's a 3-day festival. And now I have a following. So I'll have a line, and people know to buy early. Don't be one of those there that say, I'll get these on the way back because I don't want to carry them around because I'll be sold out. So people know that. So there will be a line, and it's a beautiful thing.
I mean, you're a pound cake rock star. You have groupies that wait for you there, and a whole following. I mean, it's incredible. And one of the things I like that you shared is that when you guys do the festivals, while your competitors at the event say I believe you said Jenny's Nuts and Fudge.
Yeah.
And you're kind of competitors because if you think about, if someone buys something from me, they may not buy it from the other person. But what people don't realize is grouping together a bunch of food vendors or competition like you guys, you're actually attracting more people to the event. And so it's a little bit of, a smaller slice of a much bigger pie is often more money. And,
right.
Because then if people are buying stuff and they're buying fudge, they can still buy pound cake. And even if there's another pound cake person there, it's still attracting more people, and maybe more people like pound cake. And now they want to try both types of pound cake. So,
That's
competition isn't an exclusive thing, I feel like. And what people don't realize in food is, competition is not necessarily bad. And there's
competition's good. It sharpens you.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things is people don't know, and there's a fast food chain called Culver's that came out of the Midwest, and they make butter burgers, and it's just like it sounds. They cook the burger in butter. And one of the things that their whole marketing strategy is that they would literally open up their restaurant across the street or next to McDonald's everywhere they went. And in McDonald's at first, like, oh my gosh, this is a bad thing. But what it actually did was it increased the amount of people going to McDonald's and Culver's. And then a lot of fast food chains then picked up on that, and a lot of fast food chains do that because why? Because if I'm a family on the road, I can now, okay, I want McDonald's, okay, drive through McDonald's, okay, I want Taco Bell or KFC, okay, we can go through there, and then a person can also have a Wendy's or a Culver's burger. So what they were doing is actually appealing to everyone, and it's the same thing you're talking about. Not everyone loves pound cake, so why not benefit the fudge? And not everyone loves fudge, so why not benefit the pound cake and just get more people there? And,
Sure.
and you know, and the more people see people buying stuff, the more likely they're willing to buy stuff. So I love the whole festival and farmers market circuit thing, and you know, it's hard because some of them you don't go well, and it's obviously a huge cost to going, like you talked about. But I love it from the perspective of, one, you're marketing directly to your consumers. Like, you're the person that's building the brand, you're the entrepreneur, you're the one cooking the pound cake or baking it, and you're there dealing with the customers. So, I mean, so you have customers, you have these fans. How do you manage the relationships with them? Is it something that they know you're coming every year, or they already know because they're going to the festival? I mean, tell me about that. Do they order from you online then, and how does all of that work?
There's a variety of ways. I've got a lot of faithful customers that order online from all over the country, and I've got a couple people that it's every 2 weeks they get 2 pounds of granola. Someone in Texas, someone in South Georgia, Pennsylvania. They just love the granola. And then there's and then I have a huge base of Outlander fans that love it, especially if there is an event or a birthday for an Outlander fan. The Pitsy Laird cake is really, really popular. But festivals, people that are local now is just getting out on Facebook pages where I am, that I've moved. And when you go to festivals, being able to tell the customers, you can also go online. You can follow me online. There's an event page, like me on Facebook to see where I am next. That's one of the things I like now is I can talk up my retail spot because a lot of people from Georgia or Atlanta area go to Helen to the Northeast Georgia mountains. It's like you can stop by and get a pound cake on the way. So there's that. But also I offer gluten-free. And that's from the farmers markets. There's a lot of people that are gluten-free. My daughter's gluten sensitive. So I do a great flour mixture. It's rice-free and it's made with ancient grains, and it gives a fabulous texture to the cake. So people that are gluten-free and try this cake really love it. But and then I developed there's a lot of diabetics too. So I have a Dawe cake that is a chocolate cake in a Dawe. It has a chocolate ganache, and it's a gluten-free, sugar-free, and dairy-free. And there's nothing artificial in it. And that's one of the things. When I started, I wanted all my ingredients to be Whole Foods compliant in case I want to get into Whole Foods.
Yeah.
So I've tried to keep that, just doing that. And so with doing anything that is sugar-free, usually you have to substitute with an artificial sweetener. The cake is sweetened with local raw honey, and the ganache is sweetened with organic maple syrup. So, and it's low carb, but it's also very tasty. I have to tell get 2 teenage boys, and I have to tell them, no, you cannot have the Dawe cakes.
Yeah, you're eating the profits.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, you mentioned that you have 2 teenage sons and a daughter, so you have 3 children. Is that correct?
I do, yeah.
And
a granddaughter.
And a granddaughter, wow. So, I mean, let's talk a little bit about all of that. I mean, you're managing, being a mother, you're managing this new business in a new store. I mean, how do you balance it? And, because a lot of people dive too much into one thing or another. So how do you balance all of it?
You do have to balance. And it's been a great thing for my kids. Of course, Lauren is, she has her own family now. So she comes to visit, and she has helped me out before, and she's great at festivals. She can really sell, and she's just a real honest person. So she comes across as in a great way for selling at events. And my sons are also learning the same thing. They're learning skills, social skills. When they go to festivals, they can wait on, which has been awesome, because before I would be there all day long by myself and really hard. You can't take a bathroom break. You don't want to miss customers and all that. And now they can come, and I'll be like, I'm going to check out other vendors. I'm going to visit people. I'm going to the restaurant. I'm going to have lunch, and they can take over. So it's been really good for them to see all this. So they'll come with me now, and we have a great time together. So that's just sort of been another blessing in this whole process. It's been good for them, and bless their hearts, they're proud of me. And they'll tell me that. So they're very encouraging. And it's been a good thing. I've seen family businesses before, and excuse me, let me just turn my phone off.
That's okay. I love that just happened, because the Scottish music and us talking about the heritage and Ancestry.com, I'm going to leave that in just because I think that was incredible. It truly shows your passion for your heritage.
Yeah, that is, that's the theme to Outlander.
Yeah. And I actually recognize the music, so I'll have to talk to Deborah. I'm sure she probably knows a little bit about it. And but anyway, back to the topic of your children, and I talk about it a lot on this podcast, is one of the greatest things I feel like we do as entrepreneurs is pass it on to our children, because it's not an education that they get in school. They don't teach business in high school or in elementary school or whatever in the same way that they can learn it from us. So having not only that base education that they learn in school, but getting the education of being an entrepreneur from a parent like yourself, I mean, it's unbelievable. And a lot of entrepreneurs, it's passed down. An entrepreneur passes on the entrepreneurial spirit from someone else. And so actually that brings up another question. So one, I love what you're doing, and I think it's so important that your kids have that as an education and an opportunity. So, I give you props for that for sure. That's awesome. But do you yourself have an entrepreneurial background, or is your family? Or I mean, it's a lot just to say, hey, I'm going to go do this, and have the courage to do it.
I think it's in the blood. I don't know. My grandmother started a store out in the country just after the Great Depression, and she, when women just didn't do that, she started a little store. My mother would run it sometimes when they had the farm going. That was up in West Virginia, in Preston County. And I don't know. I just really like the thought of making money. I've of course worked for other people, but I like working for myself. And my sister had started a little local magazine, before I had met my husband. And she ended up getting sick, and I started working with her, and I had to take it over. And I loved it. It was a mailer. We mailed 10,000 copies every month, and you just really became a part of the community. But I love selling ads, and I like talking to people, and I like making things make more money. So I got it to grow, and it really, took off. That was the Buford Free Delivery in Buford, Georgia. And so that was fun for me. And then when my husband and I got married, I took over his secretarial business. He had his own practice. He specialized in sports medicine, and he traveled all up and down the East Coast. And so I liked promoting his business. I set up all of his appointments and his clients. I knew them. I knew, tried to know as much about them as I could, and would do follow-up calls and tried to just really grow his business. And I think I did a pretty good job at that. But, and then I really liked what he did. Of course, I getting back to what we'd spoken about before, I like to ride as well. And so I became an equine sports massage therapist, and we kind of worked together. So that was a lot of fun. But so that was more of, just wanting to do my own thing. And So the thought of going to work for somebody else just...
Yeah. It becomes hard when someone else wants to dictate your schedule for you, or you don't have the flexibility to be there for your kids or the things that you want to do, or your significant other and things like that. I think it's just one of those things. And to ever go back, I can never imagine if I ever had to go back to an office or an office job or a 9 to 5 where my hours were dictated for me, where I couldn't work as hard as I wanted when I wanted to, and have the flexibility to be there for my stepdaughters and Deborah and my family and all of that. I would lose my mind. And, and I like the freedom of it. And, I work as hard as I work, depends on how much, money comes in, and sometimes it's not that way. So it's just one of those things where I love the beauty of being an entrepreneur. I love the beauty of the relationships that we form as entrepreneurs. That's it's an amazing thing. And, but I do want to talk to you a little bit about and we're going to go off on another tangent, but I know what it is because I grew up on a horse farm, but tell me a little bit about what an equine massage therapist does.
Equine massage therapist, what I did was incorporate different modalities. I didn't stick with just massage work, equine body work. I watched a lot of, Ron was a equine chiropractor and he did acupuncture, so I couldn't do a lot of what he did. I did acupressure. I took courses at the Chi Institute for massage, more medical, Chinese medical massage, and did Don Duran's massage therapy school down outside of Ocala, which he's excellent, Don Duran is. And so I had sort of a shoe-in just because of Ron and who he knew and following him and watching him, and he was very good in what he did. So I combined different modalities and just sort of had a routine of working on a horse where I'd go over them, and then I do deep stretching and massage, and I would usually end everything, acupressure, and then end everything with electrical therapy. So using a TENS unit, usually on just on their backs. They usually have most of the issues, but
the same as athletes use. And in my soccer days, I used quite a bit of that. And actually, I just bought another one because of working out all the time. I'm getting sore, and it's become one of those things that it's just a good treatment to get blood flow and things like that to places.
Exactly. Yeah.
But people don't realize it, but horses are, they're athletes basically, especially when they're ridden or in whatever, whether they're lassoing cattle and in the, why is it going blank? But they're, whether they're showing in their dressage horses or they're just riding on a farm to help the ranch and do the cattle, or they're, why am I going blank? Barrel racing and things like that. And it depends on what they do, but they're they're athletes, really. They need to be fed right. They need to be monitored. They need the proper exercise and the proper stretching and the, making sure, I remember growing up and my mom stretching all the horses' legs before they went out, and they do get injured, and so you're trying to avoid injury because just like an athlete, you're investing time and money into them, and they need to perform, and they're ridden, and so that's hard work for the horse, and it's just incredible the athleticism, and some horses are more athletic than others, and the whole thing, and it just teaches you so much. And then the whole bond that happens between a rider and a horse or an owner and the horse just becomes so amazing. And horses can, if they are lucky, they can live up to 30 years plus. But generally you get, a good 20 to 25 years with a horse, and they're your companion, and it's just it's an incredible thing, and the whole athleticism of a horse just blows my mind. And different breeds of different horses do great things. Quarter horses, they can run a quarter of a mile faster than any other horse. That's why they're good for barrel racing and working on farms. Yeah, and then you have thoroughbreds who are obviously your race horses because they're taller and they have longer legs, so of course they're faster over longer distances. And it's an incredible thing. And so I didn't mean to go down the tangent. It was really just my going back in the day and living the horse thing. But I was curious, and I wanted the audience to know, that there is this out there, because not many people know how much time and care it takes to take care of animals. We talked a little bit about the coyotes and the chickens, but it's also horses and other animals. I mean, if you're making an athlete, you got to treat them like an athlete. And so
it is.
It's a cool thing.
It is. And anything that anybody would want to get into, they'd want to research it first. I've seen people just jump in and say, I'm going to go get a horse, or you'll have somebody that's in vet school that has never been around horses and think, I think I'll be an equine veterinarian. I'm like, oh my gosh, you really need to. You have to spend a lot of time around, because you've got to know their body language. They're big animals and you can get hurt so easily. But you really need to do your research on the care of them before you get them.
Yeah, no, it's one of the things why growing up, my mom, while we trained and bred and did show circuits and all that, or my family did. I stuck to the soccer side, but I was involved in horses and showed a little bit here and there growing up. But the thing is you really need to go take lessons somewhere and learn how to the care of the horse and the amount of time it takes and all of that, because it's it's not your dog where you just feed it and it follows you around and you just let it out to go to the bathroom. No, they need to be worked, and they need to be ridden, and there's a lot of time and effort and maintenance that goes on. And horses are like dogs in ways that the trust has to be mutual. It's not, you just don't earn a horse's trust, and they just don't earn your trust. Like, it takes a relationship and building it. And I love it because growing up that way and having to deal with horses, and knowing that trust and how it happened and all that, I mean, it's the way we should be as human beings, right? We often trust people too quickly or don't trust people at all, but it's something that in a balanced relationship that you trust each other. I mean, right, I trust the horse that it's not going to buck me off, and he trusts me that I'm not going to treat him poorly and I'm going to take care of him. And you build this relationship that's just so amazing. We're talking about how smart coyotes were, but it actually amazes me how smart horses are. Like, I mean, we would let them with halters, but when my parents would go away, I get lazy sometimes and watch the farm, and I could literally open the gate, and the horses would make their own way to the barn, most of them, and know which stall to go into, and they knew when it was time to go out. They know the time it's feeding time. And craziest thing is, during the winter, you let them out during the day and in the barn during the night because it's cold, and you flip-flop it during the summer, and they almost know exactly when that time of year is, like when it happened. Right. And I'm just like, unbelievable, and just such intelligent animals. And I've seen them, we've gotten stuck in snowstorms and stuff like that, and they know how to dig up the snow and get to the grass and stay warm and dig their way, up to the barn if they have to and help. And it's just kind of crazy. You're like, oh man, like they're really intelligent. Thankfully, the weather patterns aren't like that, and we're more predictable now. A snowstorm doesn't come out of the middle of nowhere, but it's it's crazy. And even water buckets, like they freeze and things like that, and they figure out ways to unfreeze, make their way at the water. Although literally I've seen them stand over the water trough outside, just all four horses breathing on it to try to get the ice to melt so they can lick it, or they'll just lick the ice. And it's just such an incredible thing to watch, actually.
Or they'll try to get their hoof in there.
Yeah, they'll get their hoof in there and break open the ice, and it's just so cool. And even if streams and stuff like that and frozen, they'll figure out ways to make their way into that and dig up the ground and move stuff around and try to break the ice. So it's so cool.
It is.
And even that,
and when a storm's coming, how they'll just drop their head and put their tail to the wind.
Yeah, they know. I know. And like, even like, you're like, oh my gosh, why are you standing under a tree? It's a lightning storm. But they know that that's a place to stay warm. And I'm like, and they stay in groups most of the time when that happens, and to keep even warmer. And you're like, it makes sense, obviously, but we don't think about it as human, how smart everything else is. So
yeah,
I love the little tangents. Brings me back. You talked about the Poundcakes bringing back memories. You're bringing back memories of my childhood and on the farm.
Yeah.
So
we could talk forever about that, because I belong to the Shenandoah Valley Pony Club, and I just love the Shenandoah Valley. They're pretty up there.
And I don't know, they're beautiful animals, and they're just so amazing. So
they really are.
My last question, as we sort of keep talking, is, one of the reasons we're talking is because the flavor of Georgia, and we've talked a little bit about Georgia grown also, but and everyone's like, oh, we talk about it all the time on this podcast, but I love everyone's opinion of it, but it's such an important thing that Georgia's doing, both through the Flavor Georgia and Georgia Grown and the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Economic Development and all of that. So, I mean, tell me about your experience with Flavor Georgia and Georgia Grown, and what it means to you as a business person.
Well, they help promote small businesses in Georgia. They promote Georgia businesses, and I think it's very important be a member of Georgia Grown if you're a business owner here. You can also be a member of Georgia Grown if you're not in Georgia, but you use Georgia ingredients or products. It helps to support the agricultural department and businesses in Georgia. Flavor of Georgia has been such a great avenue for small businesses to showcase their product and to get support behind it. I was a finalist this year, and it's opened up even more wholesale. I'm also on Georgia Crafted, so that is a business. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Georgia Crafted, where they have products from Georgia that is sort of a gift box. You can order and get different products from Georgia, and she's very particular about what products she has. So, but she's got a great business that's taken off. And she likes to access any of the Flavor Georgia finalists or whatever to get in to Georgia Crafted. So my Poundcakes are there now. But they've just done a great job, and it keeps growing and getting better. And they'll have different, there was a symposium in Macon a few weeks ago, and just a lot of just informational classes that you can take to help your business. And I took my boys to that. It was good for them to go, and we tag team because there were classes I wanted to be in that were at the same time. So one of them went and took notes for me, and I can't say enough good things about it. And I encourage anybody that I know that has a business that would be a good fit, please become a member of Georgia Grown.
Yeah, I think it's incredible. And one of the unfortunate things is you were a finalist this year in the Flavor of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And you had talked a little bit about it before we got on the podcast. You had entered the contest the last 4 years, I believe.
I had.
And so what was the product that got you into the Flavor of Georgia this year?
Luscious Lemon.
So is that the one?
Luscious Lemon Poundcake.
The one we talked about with the lemon simple syrup, which I drooled over once you talked about it.
Yeah.
And I know it's unfortunate. So, I mean, you weren't able to attend the actual final event, which is unfortunate because you got sick. But, I mean, was that heartbreaking?
It was so heartbreaking. I cried. Yes, it was awful. Number one, I was so excited. It was like I hit the lottery. I had prepared. I had this great speech. I had it nailed down. I had ordered. My daughter was going to come with me. I was going to pull her and the kids in because they've been a support team for me. And we just had a great story to share. And I had my whole setup. It's like I want a burlap table cover that's fringed, and I purchased one in South Florida and had it shipped to some other company that finished it for me, and had it set up, and it looked really good. I was so disappointed. It was, I was very sad. It was a very sad day.
I mean,
like I said earlier when we were talking, I thought that I got up and it was pollen that was out here, and everything was starting to bloom. And so a couple of days before that, I started getting a sore throat, and I thought that's what that was. And I know that morning, I was terrified that it was a flu, but thank goodness it wasn't.
Well, I mean, and as an entrepreneur, I mean, it's hard to make a decision like that. Some people push themselves through that and make it sick. So, I mean, how do you decide whether or not you push yourself through it, or you just say, okay, it's as much as I want this and want to be there, I need to not go and take care of myself?
Well, you have to have this thing called Serve Safe certification. And you cannot prepare food, serve food if you have if you have a fever. That would not be. And so in another circumstance, I don't know whether I could have probably pushed through to do something. I was not feeling too well, though. Pretty tough when you got a temperature.
Yeah, and we
voice. That was the other thing. My voice was gone.
Well, I think it's and that you touched upon the serve safe thing. I think that's so important because a lot of people in the audience probably don't, unless you're a food entrepreneur, don't understand what that is, which is basically the basic certification you get for serving food safely. It's basically just like it sounds, and what that means, and all the different regulations, and how to store food, and how to cook it, and what the temperatures need to be, and how to write cross-contamination plans, and so that cross-contamination doesn't happen, and things like that. So your answer was, again, so simple and so obvious. I'm like, oh, yeah, that would make sense. And so, but the audience definitely, there's the reason they have those protocols in places is so when things happen, like you just said, you're sick and it could be contagious, that you can't serve food. And so there's an easy decision. So this decision is actually made for you if you look at the things you've been taught. So I love that. And I said it was my last question before, but I do have one more as we wrap up. And so Ellen, if you could go back to 5 years ago when you started this business, what advice would you give yourself now?
I would say don't get discouraged. There have not been many times that I've been discouraged, but when little things happen, it's just don't take things personal, and just push through.
Awesome.
Because sometimes it's not about you.
Yeah, that's true. And I say this a lot, and people I mentor, people that work for me, or just in general when life happens, is it's not about what happens to us, it's about what happens for us. Because I think everything that happens, there's a chance to grow and a chance to learn and educate ourselves in ways and pivot and better things, really, honestly. And, if it's not going right, then I'm not doing it correctly, or there's another way I need to look at it, or what is my part in it that I'm doing wrong and I need to fix. So I think there's just so much there to what you said, and being discouraged. I love that because you said it earlier in the podcast, is not to be discouraged, because it doesn't really help anything. All we can do is just take it for what it is. We can't control it. And we need to move forward, and we need to learn from it in order for it to not happen again. So it's one of those cool things. So Ellen, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And I actually really look forward to asking you to be on the podcast again in the next 8 to 10 months to hear how your store's going. So if you'd like to be on the podcast again, I would love to have you back on and release another episode in about a year. And
I'd love to, yeah.
Talk about the trials and tribulations of your store, because you were right at the point where you're opening it up. So I think the audience would love to hear how that goes and that new aspect in your life as an entrepreneur.
Stay tuned. We'll see where things go.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you again. And this is Justin, the Food Entrepreneurs Podcast. If you guys like what we're doing and like Ellen's story, please share it. Please share it on social media. Tell your friends, tell your family. You know, she's giving away a lot of information. She volunteers her time to be on the podcast. And what we're hearing here is great things. And you're not alone out there. If you're an entrepreneur, there's plenty of us out there that go through the trials and tribulations of life and business. So thank you all for listening in, and have a great day.